Hi, Liz from Cooked Raw Feed here, and today I'm going to take you through how to make sauerkraut, which is really surprisingly simple to do. Okay, so I've got these half cabbages left over from my veg box, and I've also got a little red one as well. So first thing you need to do is rinse the cabbages and then save a few of the outer leaves, and these are going to be used when we pack the jar. Next thing to do is to shred the cabbages if you have a food processor with a slicing attachment, and just chop your cabbage into chunks and push it through your food processor, or you can just do it by hand. So I like to cut the cabbages into quarters and then remove the core, and then just take your time and cut them as thinly as you can into nice slices. And you want to get a nice big bowl, or if you don't have a big bowl like this, you could use a big pot, your largest container, a big plastic storage box or a big soup pot, or whatever kind of big vessel you have. Okay, so I've got all my red and white cabbage shredded into this big bowl now. And of course you don't have to use a mix of red and white, you could just use red or just white. You could even use different kind of cabbages, like pointed cabbages. Any kind of tightish cabbage works well for a sauerkraut. So once you've got all your cabbage shredded, you need to put some salt through it. So you can weigh the cabbage and work out what 2% of that weight is and put that amount of salt in. Or if you're lazy like me and you're just doing this at home, not in a commercial setting, you can just do it by eye. So it normally works out at about a tablespoon of salt per regular sized cabbage. So I would say this amount is about 2 regular sized cabbages. So I'm going to put about 2 tablespoons of natural salt in. So I'm using this really nice Irish sea salt. You want to use a fine or a flaky salt, not a big chunky one. And then just tumble the salt through the cabbage at first. And then you can start massaging it once the salt is evenly dispersed through the cabbage. And at this stage I like to add some extra flavours as well, so it's totally optional. You can leave it like this, or you can add things that go really nicely in this kind of European ferment. So juniper berries, fennel seeds, caraway seeds, some chopped dill or dill seed, things like that. Sometimes I make sauerkraut with just the white cabbage, and I put some turmeric and black pepper in and make a golden kraut, which is not very European, but it's so good on dals and soups and in sandwiches. There's loads of ways to use it. Anyway, today I'm going to go for some caraway seeds. You can buy these in our grocery section in the farm shop, and some juniper berries, so to taste really. So for 2 cabbages, I'd say about a tablespoon of each, but yeah, do it to your taste. Now that the salt's mixed through and the spices are mixed through, I'm going to start giving it quite a firm massage, and you want it to just taste pleasantly salty, so let your taste buds be your guide. Trust your taste buds. So when you first start, I would always advise putting in less salt than you think it might need, and then give it a taste. You can always add salt, but you can't really take it away. If you do accidentally put too much salt in, then you can just add some more vegetables. Obviously if you put too little salt in, just add some more salt. And if you've run out of cabbage and your ferment is too salty, you can always add things like grated carrot or parsnip or swede, even some grated apple or pear, any kind of root vegetable or even squash as well, some grated butternut. It's good in a kraut. Okay, so I think mine is fairly well mixed for now, so I'm just going to taste it to see if it needs more salt. No, it's good, it's perfectly salty. Just tastes like really nicely seasoned. So the salt will start to draw the liquid out of the cabbage and it will create its own brine. You don't need to add any water to a sauerkraut. There should be plenty of liquid in the cabbage itself. So you can see it's starting to change quite a lot already. It looks wet. The volume has decreased quite a bit, but it's still got a bit of a way to go. Instead of just massaging it madly, what I'm going to do is just let the salt do the work for me. So I'm just going to put it to one side for about half an hour and just let the salt do its thing, and then I'll come back to it and give it another massage after that. Okay, so the mixture has been sitting for about half an hour and I've just given it another quick little massage and I think it's ready to pack. So you can tell it's ready to pack when you pick up a handful and squeeze it. So lots of liquid comes out, so you know it's got plenty of brine, enough to cover it up when it's nice and tightly packed down. You want to get a nice big clean jar. No need to sterilise, but obviously do give it a really good clean and a good rinse. Then you can start packing it. So the key to successfully packing ferment is to make sure you really firmly press it down so there's no air pockets within the jar. So I just do a couple of handfuls at a time and then press it down really firmly, making sure I get into the corners. Every bit of the surface area has been firmly pressed down. If your jar's opening isn't big enough to get your hand in, then you could just use a rolling pin or a wooden spoon, something like that, to help you pack it nice and firmly. Take your time with this, make sure you do a really thorough job. If there are any air pockets in your ferment, then it can quite easily go bad, so it's really important to make sure it's nice and firmly packed in. Obviously, if you don't have a big jar like this one, you can use a few small ones. That's fine. What you don't want to do is overfill the jar, so you want to make sure leave at least a couple of inches of headroom at the top, because as it ferments it can be quite active and bubbly and spill over, so you want to make sure it's got plenty of room to do all that stuff. Okay, so you want to make sure you've got all the liquid that has formed in the bottom of the bowl in the jar as well. And obviously, before you get started, make sure your work surface is clean, your knife, your chopping board, everything like that, because it's impossible to get every bit in the jar first time. I don't want to waste any. Okay, so this last bit of packing, I want to make sure it's really neatly packed in. There's nothing up the sides of the jar. Anything that can be exposed to air is liable to go mouldy. So as you can see, the brine, the level of the brine here is rising above the level of the vegetables, and that is exactly what we want. We want every single little bit of this mixture to be submerged neatly under the brine, and then we'll know, you know, it'll all be safe under there. Okay, and so that's why we saved these followers. We're going to use them to tuck everything neatly under the brine. So all these little bits of chopped cabbage obviously they would just float up and get exposed to air if we didn't do something about it. So once you're happy that everything is really firmly and neatly as you can packed in, then you get your followers. If you've got a really big cabbage leaf, you could break it to size. I'm just going to layer up a few of these smaller ones, and you want to cover the entire surface area as neatly as you can. So I think just 3 leaves should do it. And then just take your time, go around the edges and neatly tuck the followers in. So just press it down so it gets covered with the brine, and then you can use your fingers or a spoon to just push the cabbage leaf down firmly around the edges. Okay, and then inevitably you'll have a few little bits that have come up the sides like that. So easiest thing to do is just get a nice clean piece of kitchen paper and go around just cleaning it up. Outside as well so we can see what's in and what's out. Okay, so as you can see, the follower has already sprung back up. So what we want to do is weigh it down so that it stays nice and firmly covering all the little bits of cabbage. So you can buy some fancy weights for fermentation online, of course, but I like to just use a jar, a smaller jar filled with water. So just one last check before I put the jar on. And then I'll pop the jar on and press it down. You might still find that your follower, the leaf is kind of curled upwards and exposed to air. Don't worry about that too much today. Just give it a check tomorrow. The salt will work on that leaf and soften and flatten it out. Tomorrow you can remove the weight, make sure it's nice and neatly tucked in again, and it should stay in place the next day. But for today, that's fine. Okay, and then you're ready to ferment. So if, like me, your weight is poking out above the neck of the jar, obviously you can't put the lid on to keep any bugs out. So the best thing to do then is to get a clean tea towel and just pop it over there, and then I'll secure it with an elastic band or a piece of string. And then I'll pop that on a plate on a shelf, not in direct sunlight, so just in an area of your kitchen that stays at a relatively similar temperature throughout the day. So not in an airing cupboard or boiler cupboard, not on the windowsill in direct sunlight, just somewhere cool and dark. It doesn't have to be completely dark. So we want to ferment it at room temperature for at least a week. If not 2. It kind of depends on the weather and how sour or how funky you like the taste. So I normally just do it for about a week, give it a taste, and then if I want it to get even sourer, or if it's very cold, it's fermenting very slowly, then I'll leave it for another week before removing the weight and the follower and popping it in the fridge to stop it fermenting. Although it doesn't completely stop it, it just slows it down right down, so it's pretty much stopped. Okay, so I'll show you one that I've done earlier. This one has been fermenting for about 2 or 3 weeks. It's actually quite cold in our kitchen here. So I'm just going to remove the weight and the follower. You can see still got quite a bit of brine. Sometimes the brine kind of soaks back into the vegetables or evaporates a bit. But yeah, you'll be able to see if there's any mould or anything. Just trust your nose. So this one was a mix of red and white cabbage and some grated apple and bay leaves. And I'm just going to give it a try now. That is really good. So instead of putting this big jar in the fridge, what I'm going to do is transfer all of this into lots of little jars and put them in the fridge, and they will last, well, if we didn't eat them straight away, which I know we probably will, they would last at least 6 months, if not a year or longer. And the way to make them last a really long time in the fridge is to look after them a bit. So don't ever double dip. You don't want to introduce new bacteria from your mouth into your jars. And when you finish taking what you want, use the tongs or the spoon or whatever you're using to kind of go around the edges like this and scrape down any little bits that might have come up the sides. Those little bits are liable to dry out and obviously get exposed to air, and then they might go mouldy. So you just want to prevent that as much as you can. And yeah, like I said, it's a good idea to transfer it into smaller jars before you put it in the fridge, so there's less exposure to air. So you just eat one jar at a time. Yeah, any questions, let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to troubleshoot. And I'm also going to put the recipe on the blog, and it's in my book, of course. So yeah, just get in touch if you need any advice about sauerkraut. Enjoy.